All right, welcome everybody. My name is Rob Maurer. Today we have with us Alex Haigh of Brand Finance to discuss Tesla's branding. You guys recently released a report on your annual brand summary for 2020, and I noticed Tesla in there. And just wanted to talk a little bit about that report and a little bit about what you guys are seeing from a branding perspective from Tesla. So, do you want to give a little bit of background on sort of what you do at Brand Finance and your position at the company?
Sure. Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, so I am a valuation director, so I'm responsible for overseeing and completing our brand research and brand valuations for our reports. I'm also responsible for the automobile table in general and the sort of ancillary sectors like tires and automotive components. As a general point about this year's this year's valuation report, we've done a a table of the top 500 most valuable brands in the world, something that we've done for the last 13 years as part of our campaign to get people to understand that brands bring value to businesses, and you should manage them in the same way that you would manage any other valuable asset. This year, as a kind of as a whole of the economy, we've noticed that brands have started to slow in growth compared to some of the previous years. That is, I think some people would say, um, uh, expected this year because of some of the kind of headwinds or some of the slowing growth in the economy overall. We've seen obviously the trade war with China and a general slowing of economic growth with Brexit and with lots of different political issues going on. In the car market, obviously the car market has been um, particularly affected by the trade war, but there's also some other interesting trends that are going on in the industry overall as companies try and find their place as new brands rise from China. Some luxury brands fall, like Aston Martin. Some continue to rise, like Ferrari. Um, and but the kind of the biggest trend that we're seeing is a move towards electric vehicles, and obviously Tesla is kind of the poster boy of that trend. And that sort of dominant position really in the market has led to growth that is pretty much unseen. In fact, it is unseen in more or less any other brand. So this year it's grown in value by 65%, and that's it's actually quite concurrent with its growth in business value overall. Um, and yeah, I mean it's just been a great year for Tesla.
Wasn't that the number one slot out of the brands that you guys cover?
It
That
was, yeah,
65%?
is the fastest growth of any brand. Yeah.
Okay, that's pretty incredible. So, can you talk to us a little bit about some of your methodology and just how you guys are, getting to these numbers? And I'm sure you can't share everything, but just in broad terms, to kind of get to those numbers.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I can share all of it. I mean, the I think that in the past, some people have looked at brand valuation and thought, sorry, I don't understand it, or because it's an intangible asset, it must be difficult to value. Um, it must be smoke and mirrors or something like that. I mean, we are, well, I am a chartered accountant, and we're very keen to be transparent about the way that we do our valuations and how they're done. I mean, the way you value a brand is pretty much like you would value any other asset. You try and find the earnings attached to that specific asset over which you have a legal right. In the case of a brand, it would be you own a trademark, and then you forecast those earnings into the future and discount them back in the way that you would sort of discount forecast cash flows to forecast a business. The challenge, obviously, with brands is working out what proportion of earnings is related to brands. The way we do it, and the way that's sort of suggested is the most appropriate way by the International Valuation Standards Council, by accountants, lawyers, tax courts, is to look at what would be the royalty fees that you would have to pay to use that brand in your business if you didn't own those trademark rights. So, the easiest example is sort of a McDonald's. The people who run the restaurants often don't own the brand. Well, no, sorry, they don't own the brand, and therefore they would have to pay a certain fee for the use of their brand on their restaurants. That kind of way of thinking is the way that we approach the valuation. So we look at what other people are paying in the industry, sort of what is likely that someone could afford to pay for a royalty given the structure of their business, and then we get a range from that analysis. Say it's 0 to 5% or something like that, and that would be the range that any brand. That would be the range in the industry that you would expect to see, depending on the strength of the brand that you're actually licensing. And so in order to work out the strength of the brand, we do original market research, and we also do some desk research to look at sort of what's being done to promote the brand, marketing investment, capital investment, that kind of thing. And we develop a score. So that's the brand strength index that we create, and that's a score out of 100. And that score out of 100 is applied to that range that you could expect of royalty fees in the industry to find, okay, for this specific brand, what is the royalty rate you would expect? So let's say in that example, you have a range of 0 to 5%, and your brand strength is 80 out of 100. That would mean applying the 80 to the 0.5, that you would be able to charge, or sorry, rather, you would have to pay 4% royalty on your revenues going forward.
Got it.
So then we look at revenue forecast going forward, apply that royalty rate, and then we discount it back to get the value of the brand.
Got it. So is the biggest factor driving the increase in Tesla's brand value this year the perceived outlook of the business that you guys have in terms of the growth going forward?
Yeah, so the two sort of key things are that drive the value of a brand is revenue forecast going forward and the brand strength, because the brand strength is basically looking at, okay, per sale, how important is the brand for that sale. But then equally, if you're producing more, distributing more, that means at each point of sale that the brand is impacting on a much larger base. So as Tesla's production increases, the value of the brand is increasing by virtue of the fact it's affecting more people.
Right. And I think just to kind of interject there, I think we see that all the time with Tesla because there is such a strong word of mouth presence for the brand that it seems like every additional sale garners, 1.x additional sales just from the extended reach of the vehicles being out in public.
Yeah. I think the thing about Tesla is that it's sort of it's sort of seen as so innovative and at the forefront of electric vehicles. So as the sort of market for electric vehicles grows and grows and grows, it will ride that wave and be at the forefront of that wave. While the brand may not be quite as well known or something that sort of an everyday person would consider just by virtue of it being a type of car that they're not accustomed to, as that acceptance grows of electric vehicles, it will be able to capture lots of customers just by virtue of the fact that it is so innovative and it's so at the forefront, like I was saying.
Right, for sure. So what is Tesla's brand strength then?
So its brand strength is, well, we do a bit like credit ratings, uh, we do ratings from the top, which is AAA plus, and so you would get a brand like Ferrari in that, down to D. But in reality, the top 500 most valuable brands generally range between an A and a AAA plus. So for Tesla, it's effectively in the middle range, so it's AA. And the the thing about Tesla is, like I was saying, although it is at the kind of cutting edge of electric vehicles and it's seen as a premium offering, it's still not quite as well known as other premium cars like Mercedes and BMW. Um, and so it still has a bit of a way to kind of gain more of an understanding about among people who don't necessarily know about it, and convince people who aren't necessarily accustomed to it that they should use it. I mean, there's obviously some issues around, or they should buy their cars. Obviously, there's also there's obviously some issues around charging points and the feasibility of having a car like that. But I think also there's just a kind of general idea that people need to accept the idea of having an electric vehicle for performance reasons or for whatever it is, before they're willing to kind of take the next step and actually buy one. I think to some extent as well, although Tesla has been pretty roaring ahead and, like I say, innovative and growing very quickly, there are obviously some risks at being quite at that point, that center of attention. So obviously Elon Musk's kind of he often comes out with statements on his Twitter feed and that kind of thing that don't necessarily always help the reputation of the business. I think the production issues have also harmed the brand in some ways, in terms of people thinking whether or not they are sort of as reliable as they would want. And then obviously the sort of Cybertruck issue probably caused a bit of a dent, but
Yeah,
that's
so
probably minor in the grand scheme of things.
I was going to ask about Cybertruck because it did seem to go somewhat viral, which I think the question exists of how much that was beneficial versus how negative it was, just from obviously the window wasn't supposed to break, but I think the fact that it did break caused a lot more attention and just focus on Tesla's brand. So yeah, what was your kind of reaction, or what are you seeing in sort of the data out there?
Yeah, I think it really plays into this all news is good news. Ultimately, it's not going to be released until late 2022. I think is the
21,
exact
yep.
21. Yeah. And so there's still some time to kind of fix those issues, and people sort of know that there are sometimes issues in those big reveals. But yeah, I mean, it got so much publicity. I think also the sort of design is so out there, that that kind of helped with the viral nature of the whole story. And so yeah, I mean, it definitely gave Tesla a boost, despite that issue. I think the challenge is that you need to kind of weigh up how much you want your name out there, and if you go that approach, or if you have those sort of issues, how much you're willing for people to kind of think, well, sort of worry about the reliability issues. I think in that case, it would, because it wasn't one of their primary models, it was generally helpful for the brand overall. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the fact that it is, a window, which is somewhat less important to the actual function of the vehicle, that
Exactly. Yeah.
it's a lot more easy to recover from.
Exactly. And I mean, if you think of a brand like Toyota that actually had some quite serious safety issues with cars that were already on the road, but was able to recover from it quite quickly. I mean, that sort of thing is minor.
Very minor, yeah.
And it's irrelevant. Yeah.
So, what are you seeing from the other automakers then, especially as it relates to electric vehicles? I'd be curious. I'm not sure how you guys have everything broken down, but um, who's successful right now? Who's fading?
Um, I think, well, I mean, generally what we're seeing, generally I would just say that obviously, as everyone knows, electric vehicles are relatively small parts of most automakers'
For sure.
portfolios. But obviously the investment that's being made into them is changing rapidly, or it's increasing rapidly. I mean, we we work with Ferrari, and 4 or 5 years ago, they were saying that they would never create an electric vehicle, and now they're sort of moving closer and closer to saying, "Oh yeah, yeah, we are." Similarly, Porsche's already said they're releasing a model. Volvo wants to be I think they want to be a luxury electric vehicle. That probably means sort of a bit more premium electric vehicle manufacturer. Volkswagen, since the emissions scandal, have been focusing on making themselves sort of the front of the forefront of electric vehicles. And actually, Volkswagen have generally performed pretty well over the last few years since that scandal. So that's pretty strong. Audi as well, obviously part of VW. They have actually fallen this year in value by about 14%, like I was saying, but that's partly just because they're restructuring their kind of general business and moving closer to electric vehicles. So I mean, it's a bit early to say, and obviously Tesla is it. If you look in the US, Tesla's the number of models that Tesla sells far outstrips competitors, but it's becoming increasingly competitive, especially in countries like China. And the competition for Tesla will definitely increase.
So, how are
I
you
think.
guys? Go ahead.
So I was just going to say, that being said, though, I mean Tesla has definitely set itself up now, now more than ever, especially since it's really starting to get the sales that it promised. It's really set itself up to kind of fend off those kind of the bigger companies, and just maintain a position as a premium sort of premium electric vehicle manufacturer. So um,
So, how are you guys seeing? Because you look at sort of regional breakdowns, right, for each brand.
we do.
How are you seeing Tesla perform sort of in the different, continents?
I mean, if you look at their brand valuation, I mean it loosely corresponds with revenue, and I mean it's about 70% in the US. It's about 15%. I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but about 15% in China, and then the rest of the world. I think Norway, interestingly, is a sort of sub segment of their annual report, um, and that's because I mean, Tesla is sort of the key one of the key brands there because of such sort of positive environmental regulation.
Hmm.
Um, so I mean, Tesla is obviously strong, growing, sells a lot in the US, but it hasn't quite captured international markets in the way that some other big brands have. I think with the production facility in Shanghai, it'll continue to grow in China and potentially in the rest of Asia. Um, and yeah, potentially in Europe, but it's less clear on that front.
Got it. Okay. So something
I
that's
think,
pretty unique to Tesla is the fact that they obviously have a marketing budget, but it's relatively small, especially compared to some of these other companies, like Porsche, Audi, Ferrari, things like that. How unique is Tesla in maybe even outside the industry in that, especially in the consumer space, to not do much advertising, if any?
yeah, I mean, obviously there are various ways of doing marketing, um, and advertising is really only one of them,
Hmm.
and generally advertising is done if you have a lot of money, um, and you're willing to spend it on that kind of thing for a and so therefore it really works particularly well for but very big established companies, and generally for those that are a bit slower moving and therefore don't create as much news and buzz as companies like Tesla. Really, Tesla can make much more, considering how innovative it is, also considering how interesting a founder and CEO it has, and the amount of news it generates. It's a much easier kind of task to get renown and get get exposure to people if you're getting in the news and sort of showing off your innovations. I mean, as we were saying, that story about Cybertruck was all over the news, and that was great for them. The fact that they're growing very quickly is all over the news. The fact that they've got stylish cars that people actually want, and they perform pretty well, and now are reasonably priced. Kind of that creates the buzz for them without having to spend on traditional media like the other brands do. So, I mean, I wouldn't say that they don't do marketing; they just do it in a different way to the other car brands.
Agree. Is there, in your recollection, can you think of other companies that may have followed a similar path like that in Tesla in the past? Not to put you on the spot, but
Yeah, I mean, in terms of cars, because a lot of the car brands have kind of been around for quite a while, and a lot of the new brands are um, just sort of shaving off a certain part of the business or creating a sort of a niche brand to capture a certain part of the market. There aren't that many examples in automobiles. One that really springs to mind, and it's sort of maybe it's a sort of an overly English example, is a brand called Fever Tree. I don't know if you have Fever Tree in the US.
we may, but I'm not familiar with it if we do.
So Fever Tree is a tonic brand, so gin and tonic. This is quite random. So please cut
It's
me off
okay. No,
if
that's
it's
okay. It's
really
interesting.
irrelevant to you. So for a long time, the only company really that did tonic water was Schweppes, and they sold it in really boring bottles. The taste was a bit
Hmm.
average. I mean, it was just something that you put in gin, and same with other mixes. So Fever Tree came along. They improved the flavor of the tonic. They introduced slightly different flavors, and then they started well, they started promoting in PR, in news articles that uh, that the point that three-quarters of your gin and tonic was tonic, and therefore you should choose something that tastes nice. And I think they've grown at something crazy like 100% a year for the last 5 years. And just because it's had this position where it's been truly innovative, and also sort of like cocking a snook to the other big brands and sort of creating a buzz around itself, that it's been able to grow that quickly. Um, I'm sure there are hundreds of other brands that have done similar things, because ultimately that's the only way you really can grow if you're a small brand with limited funds. You can't afford to pay for TV advertising. You have to do it like
True.
that. You have to be kind of creating a name for yourself with
True.
with other ways.
All right, cool. Is there anything else that you wanted to mention while we've got you? Otherwise, I think that was pretty robust.
No, I think that's everything. Yeah, just let me know if you need anything else, and I can pop
Cool.
back on.
All right, Alex. Thanks for the time. Really appreciate you coming on.
Perfect. Thanks a lot. See ya.
Thanks.